Hello. We will be continuing to read True Love today, a practice for awakening the heart by Thich Nhat Hanh. Last chapter we read was called Recognizing the Presence of the Other. And today's chapter is called Overcoming Pride. So let's dig in. The fourth mantra is more difficult to practice. It has to do with a situation in which you are suffering yourself and you think that your suffering has been created by the person you love most in the world. If it had been someone else who had said that to you or done that to you, without a doubt you would be suffering less. But in this case, it is the person I love most in the world who said that to me, who did that to me, and I am suffering more. I am deeply hurt by the fact that my suffering was caused by the person I love most. I feel like going to my room, closing the door, staying by myself and crying. I refuse to go to him or her to ask for help. So now it is pride that is the obstacle. According to the teaching of the Buddha, in true love there is no place for pride. If you are suffering, every time you are suffering you must go to the person in question and ask for their help. That is true love. Do not let pride keep you apart. If you think your love for this person is true love, you must overcome your pride. You must always go to him or her. That is why I have invented this mantra for you. Practice so as to bring out oneness of your body and mind before going to the person to say the following mantra, the fourth mantra so far. Dear one, I am suffering. Please help. This is very simple, but very hard to do. I would like to tell you a story from my country. A young man went off to war, leaving his pregnant wife behind. 2 years later, he was able to return home, and the young woman went with their young son to meet her husband. They cried together out of joy. In Vietnam, it is our tradition, when an event of this kind takes place, it has to be announced to the ancestors. So the young father asked his wife to go to the market to buy the things that are needed for the offering that is placed on the altar to the ancestors. Such an altar is found in every house. Each morning, we burn a stick of incense. Each morning, we burn a stick of incense to our ancestors on this altar. And in this way, we make a connection with them. Burning this incense, adorning the altar with photographs of our ancestors, and dusting the shrine off are very important gestures. These are moments in which we come in contact with our ancestors. There are people living in the world who are completely uprooted because they do not practice such a turning towards their ancestors. I remember finding that very interesting. So the young wife went off to the market. During this time, the young father was trying to convince his child to call him daddy. The little boy refused. "Mister, you're not my daddy. My daddy is somebody else. He visits us every night, and my mummy talks to him every night, and very often she cries with him. And every time my mummy sits down, he sits down too. Every time she lies down, he lies down too." After he heard these words, the young father's happiness entirely evaporated. His heart turned into a block of ice. He felt hurt, deeply humiliated, and that is why, when his wife came home, he would no longer look at her or speak a word to her. He ignored her. The woman herself began to suffer. She felt humiliated, hurt. When the offering was placed on the altar, the young father burned the incense, recited the prayers to the ancestors, and did the 4 traditional prostrations. Then he picked the mat up instead of leaving it there for his wife, so she could do the 4 prostrations in her turn. In his mind, he thought that she was not qualified to present herself before the ancestors, and she was humiliated by this. After the ceremony, he didn't stay at the house to eat, but went to the village and spent the day in a bar. He tried to forget his suffering by drinking alcohol, and he did not come back to the house until very late at night. The following day it was the same thing, and this went on for several days in a row. The young woman could not take it anymore. Her suffering was so great that in the end she threw herself in the river and drowned. When the young father heard this news, he returned to the house, and that night he was the one who went to get the lamp and lit it. Suddenly the child cried out, Mister, it's my daddy, he's come back," and he pointed to the shadow of his father on the wall. "You know, mister, my father comes every night. Mummy talks to him and sometimes she cries, and every time she sits down, my daddy sits down too." In reality, this woman had been alone in the house too much, and every night she'd talked to her shadow. She'd been alone in the house too much, and every night had talked to her shadow. "My dear one, you are so far away from me. How can I raise my child all by myself? You must come back home soon." She would cry, and of course, every time she sat down, the shadow would also sit down. Now the husband's false perception was no longer there, but it was too late. His wife was already dead. A misperception is something that can destroy an entire family. The Buddha told us a number of times that we are subject to misperceptions in our everyday life. Therefore, we have to pay close attention to our perceptions. There are people who hang on to their misperceptions for 10 or 20 years, and during this time they continue to suffer and make other people suffer as well. Why did the young father not want to talk this thing over with his wife? Because pride got in between them. If he had asked his wife, "Who is this person who came every night? Our child told me about him. I'm suffering so much, my darling. You have to help me. Explain to me who this person is." If he had done that, his wife would have had a chance to explain, and the drama could have been avoided. However, it was not only his fault, but that of his young wife as well. She could have come to him and asked him the reason for his change in attitude. "Husband, why don't you look at me anymore? Why don't you talk to me? Have I done something awful that I deserve such treatment? I'm suffering so much, dear husband. You have to help me." She did not do this, and I do not want you to make the same mistake in your everyday life. We are subject to misperceptions every day, so we have to pay attention. Every time you think it is somebody else who is causing the suffering, you must remember this story. You must always check things out by going to the person in question and asking for his or her help. "Dear one, I'm suffering so much. Help me, please." It's a tough story to read, that one, without tearing up. I remember the first time, at least. That's the end of the chapter called Overcoming Pride. we'll continue. The next chapter is called Deep Listening. You have now received the transmission of the 4 mantras for the practice of true love. You know that it is not difficult to practice these mantras. You should learn them by heart, and you must have the courage, the wisdom, and the joy to practice them. But if the situation has already become extremely difficult, what can you do? What can you do if love has already caused too much suffering between the two of you? For appearances, you behave so that others will think that you two are still living together and that you still find joy in living together. But in reality, there is no more joy. There is no more happiness. There isn't even communication anymore. You have lost the capacity to listen and speak. Communication has become difficult, in fact impossible. What can you do in a situation like this, when the two of you have been living together and making each other suffer? According to Buddhism, we are dealing with samyojana, the lump of suffering within us that is translated as internal formation. Samyojana. When you say something that makes another person suffer, that person develops an internal formation. If that person is trained in Buddhism, he or she will know how to untie that knot. And if not, he will let it remain there in the depths of their consciousness. If you are a person who practices mindfulness, you will be aware that a knot has been formed in the person you love, and you will know how to untie it. Every day we say or do things that might leave behind internal formations in the person we love. Following that, then the suffering and pain can grow, and the person we love turns into something like a bomb that might explode at any moment. A few words are all it takes to trigger anger in this person, who you are afraid to approach and who you are afraid to talk to because he or she has become a bomb loaded with too much suffering. When you try to get away from him or her, this person thinks that you do so out of contempt, and their suffering increases. You also have become a bomb because you have lost the ability to speak the language of peace, of understanding. You have lost the ability to listen, and so all communication has become impossible. In Buddhism, we talk about a bodhisattva called Avalokiteshvara, the one who has the ability to listen and to understand the suffering of others. Quick little bit of knowledge I think I have. Avalokiteshvara is one of the names for a Buddha that's also named, I think, Kuan Yin, and Kuan Yin in Chinese means the one who looks down upon the cries of the world, which I think sounds like a similar translation to this. The one who has the ability to listen and understand the suffering of others. Yeah, that's legit the same meaning. Kuan Yin was like the one who looks down upon the cries of the world, and therefore has the ability to listen and understand the suffering of others. Avalokiteshvara. Hey, I got some knowledge. If we evoke this name, Avalokiteshvara, or perhaps even Kuan Yin, it is in order to learn to listen. One who hears the cries of the world. In everyday life, deep listening, attentive listening, is a meditation. If you know the practice of mindful breathing, if you wish to maintain calm and living compassion within you, then deep listening will be possible. Through the practice of walking meditation, through sitting meditation, through mindful breathing, we can cultivate calm, we can cultivate awareness, and we can cultivate compassion. And that way we will be able to sit there and listen to each other. the other suffers as long as he is in need of someone to listen to him, and you are the person who can do it. If someone has to have recourse to a psychotherapist, it is because no one in their house can listen. A psychotherapist should be able to sit there and really listen, but I know therapists who have suffered too much and do not truly have the ability to listen to their clients. So if we love someone, we should train in being able to listen. By listening with calm and understanding, we can ease the suffering of another person. An hour spent in this way can already relieve a great deal of another person's pain. In Plum Village, our practice place, deep listening is a very important practice. Every week, we get together once or twice to practice listening deeply to each other. As we listen, we do not say anything. We breathe deeply and we open our hearts in order to really listen to one another. 1 hour of this kind of listening is very effective, and it is something very precious that can be offered to the person you love. That's the end of the chapter on deep listening. Do not say anything. Breathe deeply and with open hearts, really listen to one another. The next chapter is called Learning to Speak with Love Again. Associated with the practice of deep listening is the practice of loving speech. We must learn to speak with love again. This is a thing that can be done in a practice community where brothers and sisters practice loving speech every day. There are pacifists who can write protest letters of great condemnation, but who are incapable of writing a love letter. You have to write in such a way that the other person is receptive toward reading. You have to speak in such a way that the other person is receptive towards listening. If you do not, it is not worth the trouble to write or to speak. Oof, okay, I like that. It's not worth the trouble to write or speak if you don't write or speak in a way that is receptive towards being read or listened. To write in such a way is to practice meditation. I remember a young American who came to us to practice. One day he was asked to write a letter to his mother, which was easy for him. On the other hand, it was almost impossible for him to write a letter to his father. His father had died, but he had suffered every time he thought of him. But he still suffered every time he thought of him. Just the idea of picking up a pen to write to his father already caused him a great deal of suffering. I proposed the following practice to him. For 1 week, he practiced mindful breathing, saying to himself, "Breathing in, I see myself as a child of 5. When one is a little boy of 5, one is very fragile and vulnerable. As he was breathing in, he saw himself as the object of his own compassion. And during the 2nd week, he meditated on his father. Breathing in, I see my dad as a little child of 5. Breathing out, I smile at the little boy who was my dad." For a whole week, the young American practiced very faithfully and very enthusiastically. He put a photo of his father on the table, and every time he walked into the room and looked at it, he practiced mindful breathing. He had never imagined that his father could have been a child of 5. Suddenly, the young man acknowledged the presence of his father as a little boy. It was the first time that he had realized that his father had suffered as a little boy, and suddenly he felt compassion. Finally, one evening, he found it possible to write a first letter to his father. That transformed him completely, and now he has some peace in his heart. Meditation is the practice of looking deeply into the nature of your suffering and your joy. Through the energy of mindfulness, through concentration, Looking deeply into the nature of our suffering makes it possible for us to see the deep causes of that suffering. If you can keep mindfulness and concentration alive, then looking deeply will reveal to you the true nature of your pain. And freedom will arise as a result of your sustaining a deep vision into the nature of your pain. Sustain a deep vision into the nature of your pain. Solidity, freedom, calm, and joy are the fruits of such meditation. That's the end of the chapter, Learning to Speak with Love Again. There's a lot in those three, so I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining, family, for learning alongside us all, each other. Much love, my siblings. See you soon.